Welcome to the next in our summer marathon series of CGSR Round the World in 80 days presentations covering all of the important national and international security issues. And today we have the distinct honor of hosting two of India's leading strategic thinkers. And full disclosure, longtime friends and associate of mine and collaborators in a number of projects, including the Track 2 programs that we've talked about here on a couple of occasions. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Gurmeet Kanwal, Brigadier Retired, Indian Army. I think you could read the poster board if you want to know more about his background, but what is probably not apparent there is his role as a mentor and his ferocious, unrelenting pace of publications. He publishes more in a month than most of us do in a lifetime, so he's hard to keep up with. And Monika Chansoria, who's going to lead off for us today, who is still at the Center for Land War Studies, the Indian Army think tank that was founded by Brigadier Kanwal, and is the leading source of strategic analysis on nuclear matters and the things that we're interested in. Monika, you ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for that very kind introduction. This is my first time at Lawrence Livermore, and I'm really very excited, and I thank you all for being here today. What I intend to do in the next 15 minutes or so would be to give a backdrop of the Chinese WMD transfers to Pakistan, what has been going on since the 1980s up till now. This relationship has affected overall strategic stability in South Asia. The collaboration extends not just in the realm of WMD transfers, that is nuclear and missile transfers, it also extends into the realm of military hardware. And the overall lowering of the nuclear threshold in South Asia by virtue of the testing of the Nasr short-range ballistic missile by Pakistan, introduction of the battlefield nuclear weapon systems by Pakistan, and ultimately how all this impacts on India's strategic restraint in what we have called a two-front scenario, with Pakistan on our western front and the People's Republic of China on our eastern front. I'll give a quick overview and a backdrop of what have been the nuclear and missile transfers like. I don't want to go too much into the detail, given the paucity of time. The overall geopolitical and geostrategic setting in the subcontinent has drawn very heavily from a very tumultuous historical past that India has had with both Pakistan and China. We've had multiple wars with Pakistan, and a very serious war with China in 1962. And this has resulted that till date, India's borders with both China and Pakistan are extremely heavily militarized borders. The nuclear and missile collaboration between the two countries is very well documented and acknowledged. This includes both direct nuclear assistance to Pakistan, which began in the 1980s, and also includes indirect missile transfers through the North Korean channel. The clandestine transfer of dual-use technology and the materials has included, and the ones I'm listing now are the significant ones, included a design for a nuclear weapon, highly enriched uranium for nuclear explosive device, the construction of an unsafe-guarded plutonium production facility and a reactor at Khushab, a reprocessing plant at Chashma, advanced computer control systems, and the supply of heavy water to the safeguarded reactor at Canop Originally, this reactor was supplied by Canada. As far as the missile transfers are concerned, the transfer of M11 and M9 missiles is well documented. And the Chinese also facilitated transfer of the Taipodong and Nodong missiles from North Korea to Pakistan. So much so that nearly 34 completed M11 missile systems were transferred back then. And this was admitted none less by the Chinese ambassador to the United States in 91, Zhu Gaizhen, when he spoke at the National Press Club. What remains more important is that this relationship, this nuclear missile collaboration, is still continuing. And we've had a series of testimonies, be it by the Director of Central Intelligence in 2003, when he confirmed that PRC entities and entities associated with Pakistan's nuclear weapons program are in fact collaborating till date. The director of the DIA in 2004 yet again testified in another Senate committee that the nuclear and missile program between Pakistan and Iran had PRC entities involved in it. George Tenet confirmed Abdul Qadir Khan's illicit network of nuclear trade, which has disturbed strategic stability in the region. And then you had very recently a US court announcing charges against a Chinese national for exporting controlled US goods for Pakistan's nuclear programs via China. Now, interestingly, there are two Chinese companies which are involved in this Chashma nuclear plant. One of them is the Zhongguan Engineering Corporation. This corporation specializes in nuclear engineering and paint coatings for nuclear reactors. And assisting the Zhongguan Corporation is the Nuclear Engineering Huashing Construction Company, which interestingly is a Chinese government-owned company. There are often these explanations from China that these entities are private and that the government does not really know what exactly are the dealings of these companies. So this proves that they are in fact government-owned companies. So the State Council is pretty much into the picture with all these interactions that have been going on. In December 2012, the Huashing Company of Nanjing had pled guilty in a US criminal court for illegally exporting high-performance epoxy coatings which are specially designed for the Chashma 2 reactor. So the point I'm trying to drive here is that China's continuing role as a nodal point in all illicit nuclear trade still continues with Pakistan. Moving on to the realm of military hardware transfers. Nearly 50% of China's surplus arms exported to Pakistan is at a subsidized price. According to the CIPRI Arms Transfers database, I tracked the data from 2005 to 2014, as recent as I could get. So the important systems that have been transferred to Pakistan include the anti-tank missile, the portable surface-to-air missile, which has been renamed the Anza-2 by Pakistan. There are main battle tanks called Al-Khalid, the Thunderweight multi-role combat aircraft, the C-801, 802 anti-ship missiles, both for the J-17 combat aircraft as well as for the Azmat fast-track craft, the F-22 frigates, which the Pakistanis have renamed Zulfikar, the Karakoram 8 lightweight trainer attack jets, self-propelled multiple rocket launchers, etc. Therefore, and finally leading up to many other items such as fire-controlled radars and air research radars. I'd like to now focus on the battlefield nuclear weapon systems, which is a very recent introduction by Pakistan, and which has altered and disturbed the existential strategic stability in the subcontinent. We are all aware of Pakistan's first-use nuclear policy and posture, and now in addition to that, they have added battlefield nuclear weapons, including smaller bombs and short-range ballistic missiles, namely the Nasr or the Hataf 9 as they call it. This has been primarily designed to achieve more limited or what they call tactical objectives on the battlefield. However, we in India consider these systems as inherently destabilizing, primarily because they are further lowering the nuclear threshold. Mounting nuclear warheads on extremely short-range forward-deployed ballistic missiles requires pre-delegation of the nuclear weapon. And this resultantly increases the risk of inadvertent and unauthorized use. The battlefield nuclear weapons require early delegation of the authority to launch and an early release of the custody of this warhead to the launcher battery with the possibility of pre-delegation to battlefield commanders who are stationed very close to the border or the battlefield, which is the case in the case of India and Pakistan, puts the command and control and physical security of that weapon system under immense strain. Given the current domestic situation in Pakistan, India is extremely concerned about this scenario, especially in terms of crises, be it an internal political crisis in Pakistan or a conflict situation vis-a-vis India. In both these scenarios, this is an extremely difficult situation. We want to argue that notwithstanding the command and control structure or the physical securities in place, the very fact that the delegation of authority to field itself creates greater risks and potential escalation thereafter. So has Pakistan then thought through things? How would an unauthorized launch or an accidental launch, how would that see vis-a-vis the escalation ladder? And what are the control systems there? The Hataf-9 or the Nasr missile. The carrier vehicle for this missile is the A-100E multiple launch rocket system. And there again, China comes into the picture because the chassis for this system, which has modified launching tube systems, has been adapted and procured by China. General Khalid Kidwai has often stated that consolidating Pakistan's strategic deterrence capability at all levels of the threat spectrum is the ultimate aim, which the Nasr missile has achieved for Pakistan. I would want to move ahead with an assumption that technically, if we believe what they state, that Pakistan has in fact acquired the capability to miniaturize a warhead and thereafter fit it onto the Nasr class. Moving ahead with this assumption, the question still remains as to whether this weapon has been mounted or not. We cannot really state this very emphatically. Primarily, this falls in the realm of military intelligence and intelligence per se. But the status to field this mounted miniaturized nuclear weapon on the launch vector still remains doubtful. And this then puts the onus back on India's nuclear posturing and overall nuclear policy. We have always considered nuclear weapons to be a political instrument. India's policy we have had a stated doctrine, and we do not consider them an instrument of war fighting. The sole purpose of nuclear weapons for India is to deter the use and the threat of use of these systems against India. Our weapons remain strictly limited in scope and in terms of operational readiness. Both the warheads, the delivery systems, and the key subcomponents are not deployed in any way in India. And the nuclear policy has unequivocally renounced first use, both no first use against nuclear weapon states and non-use against non-nuclear weapon states. We have a retaliation policy only. This, again, then rules out nuclear preemption, which can be verified in terms of the force structures that we have, the alert levels, the demating of our systems. However, we would like to add that as opposed to our proposed draft doctrine of 1999, in 2003, the Indian Cabinet Committee on Security significantly stated that nuclear weapons will only be used in retaliation against a nuclear attack on Indian territory or on Indian forces. This time round, we added the word anywhere. There is a very interesting debate going on in the subcontinent and beyond as to would classification of battlefield nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons really affect the Indian nuclear doctrine or not? And what would be the fallout of this introduction? I think one thing that we are very clear in India is that the classical definition of yield or mode of delivery, often being used as a criterion to classify the weapon system as tactical or battlefield, would not really apply in the Indian case. Because any nuclear weapon of any quality, mode of delivery, yield, or used against any type of target, the impact that this weapon is going to have will be strategic. that impact will not be tactical. And thereafter, India's nuclear doctrine cannot differentiate between a tactical and a strategic nuclear weapon strike. After numerous discussions with people who are informed, we have tried to draw a consensus, and we do have one, that the label on a nuclear weapon that is used to attack India, whether it is a strategic weapon, a tactical weapon, a battlefield weapon, whatever the name may be, that label remains irrelevant from an Indian perspective. For us, a nuclear attack is a nuclear attack, period. And therefore, we come to this two-front scenario, which has really caused a lot of strain on our forces, and we are fighting a two-front war with the China-Pakistan nuclear commerce remaining politically and strategically driven, Beijing's depth of engagement in South Asia being politically and having both political and strategic objectives at work. There is an increasing presence of China in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which serves both strategic and political objectives for China. We are all aware of the presence of PLA construction corps workers in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. In fact, this presence is now becoming almost permanent. This is a map of the One Belt, One Road initiative launched by Xi Jinping. It runs through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in Gilgit-Baltistan, right through the length and breadth of Pakistan, ending into the Gwadar port. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Xi Jinping has promised $46 billion of investment in Pakistan over the next 5 to 7 years. It starts from Kashgar, runs through the Karakoram Highway, which is extremely crucial for India, which will be used in a potential conflict scenario by both Pakistani forces and Chinese forces against India. It includes reconstruction of this highway. And finally, as I said, it reaches Gwadar port in south of Balochistan. But the Chinese have their security concerns. In fact, the Pakistan army has raised a separate division to ensure that the Chinese workers working in Balochistan area get adequate security, because Chinese workers and engineers have often been targeted in Balochistan in the past. There is a heavy focus on areas in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. As I said, they serve strategic and political diplomatic objectives for China. And the Chinese have used this opportunity to provide diplomatic, quasi-diplomatic support to Pakistan's position on Kashmir by virtue of this highway and their projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. I'd like to just end by stating what former Army Chief of India, General Deepak Kapoor, stated at the Army Training Command Doctrine Seminar way back in December of 2009, where he said that the Indian Armed Forces must prepare for a two-front war. Till date, India has displayed, and there is no doubt, that we have displayed immense strategic restraint in the face of extreme provocations. But the threshold of India's tolerance now is being severely tested. Any future terrorist strike which causes substantial casualties in the future with a proven evidence of state involvement, be it the case of Mumbai 26/11 attacks or the attacks at India's parliament, it would be very difficult for India this time to hold itself back. And therefore, Pakistan's strategic posturing, which is coupled with its involvement in terrorist activities against India, has deeply complicated South Asian stability and the resultant posturing in the subcontinent. I'd like to stop here. I hand it back over to the chair. I thank you all for giving me a very patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. Gurmeet, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, my apologies for turning up late. We did start from Los Gatos on time, but we did not anticipate the type of traffic that we eventually ran into. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Zach, for inviting us. I've known Zach since 2005, I think, if not 2004, since I left the army. And it's been a learning experience. Every single conference that he's organized, the discussions, the simulation exercises, tabletop exercises, have all been a learning experience. And it's great to be here with you today. Thank you. Just in case you're wondering why that guy is carrying a stone instrument and is ill-clad, let's remind ourselves of something that's attributed to Einstein. Monika has spoken a lot about regional instability. I shall not labor over these slides, but go over them very briefly. It is said that we live in interesting times, but in South Asia, we live in a dangerous neighborhood, closely vying with West Asia for the #1 spot. We'll get there, I think. Quick look. The second last bullet on this slide, something has changed overnight. Whether it's a good deal or it's a bad deal, or like some people are saying, a bad deal is better than no deal, time will tell. We haven't seen the fine print as yet. But the general Indian perspective is that we do not wish Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. And therefore, even a bad deal is better than no deal. But we can talk about it. The other countries around us, all of them in some kind of turmoil or the other. However, it is insurgency in AFPAC that is the greatest cause of instability in our region. We live in the age of terrorism that's marked by the cult of the suicide bomber. We also live in a dangerous nuclear neighborhood. 6 of the 8 nuclear powers of the world bring to bear their nuclear weapons on Southern Asia. Therefore, my deduction is, quite obvious deduction, that future wars in Southern Asia will be fought in the nuclear environment. With that, I'll go on to the India-China-Pakistan security competition. India-China first. If you just see Chinese actions in the last 2 months, May and June, it gives you the true extent of assertiveness that China has been practicing internationally. Some people call it aggressiveness. I prefer the term assertiveness. Prime Minister Modi of India went to Beijing in May and made a very forceful plea for clarifying the line of actual control. Some of you who don't deal with Southern Asia will find it difficult to believe that there is a line of actual control, but nobody seems to know where it runs. So there is a need to clarify where the line of actual control runs on the ground and on the map. There cannot be a better confidence-building measure. Both the Chinese president and the Prime Minister had agreed with Prime Minister Modi that yes, we should clarify early on where the LAC runs. But a month later, the Chinese spokesperson said, we know where it runs, there is no need to clarify. Warning to India on prospecting for oil off the Vietnamese coast within Vietnam's territorial waters. Not even in the EEZ, within territorial waters. China, of course, hasn't signed the Law of the Sea Treaty. For that matter, has the United States signed? Xinjiang Gwadar Economic Corridor. Monika spoke about it. $46 billion worth of investment over the next 5 to 10 years. Which country in the world would invest $46 billion in today's day and age? We've seen what's happening in Greece. $46 billion in a sinking economy, in a country that is, in the minds of some people at least, gradually becoming a failed state. I prefer another term, a gradual implosion. I know most of you or all of you are scientists. Implosions cannot be gradual in physics. But in terms of a mindset, a gradual implosion appears to make sense. Reclaiming islands in the South China Sea, building airstrips, building radar stations in disputed territory, Spratly and Parasil Islands. However, at the strategic level, India and China relations have been improving, except for the security relationship. There is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, guarding the Himalayas with a stick while the Chinese dragon is staring down. We know what happened in 1962. We have a territorial and boundary dispute with China. China is in physical occupation of 38,000 square kilometers of Indian territory in the Aksai Chain in Ladakh, shown in the northwest corner of the slide, if I might treat this as a map. And that area that was flashing, I'll flash it again. That's the Shaksgam Valley, 5,180 square kilometers, illegally ceded by Pakistan to China under a bilateral agreement of March 1963. Naturally, India does not recognize that agreement. Not much of a dispute in the middle sector. Eastern sector, Sikkim acceded to India sometime during the 70s. Bhutan is, of course, a Himalayan kingdom that's independent. Then the other eastern part, the balanced part of the eastern sector, the McMahon line. There is the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, ALP it says on the map, the chart. The entire Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, 90,000 plus square kilometers, is claimed by China as Chinese territory. They call it southern Tibet, right down to the Brahmaputra River. In my view, early resolution of the territorial dispute should be a national priority, both for India and China. But the Chinese don't appear to think so, and many Indians don't think so as well. China is engaged in the strategic encirclement of India. Those arrows are real, they're not meant to scare. China is making inroads into every country around India on land and on the sea. The so-called string of pearls strategy in the Indian Ocean region. Some areas of concern. China does not recognize India as a nuclear-armed state. Therefore, refuses to discuss nuclear CBMs and nuclear risk reduction measures with India. Could there be something more pig-headed? I mean, what are nuclear CBMs? What are risk reduction measures meant for? No, you are not a nuclear-armed state, so we can't discuss these with you. Of course, IAEA safeguards opposed by China, part of the Indo-US nuclear deal, the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement of 2005. Will they support the NSG waiver? We have serious doubts. Tactical assertiveness. I said the relationship at the strategic level between China and India is stable. At the tactical level, it's marked by assertiveness. Again, some people use the term aggression, political, diplomatic, and military. Some of these issues are flashed on the screen. My deduction is that China's growing power and influence in Asia poses a strategic challenge to India. These two Asian giants will compete, but that competition, given the territorial dispute, could lead to a clash. Not good for either of us. Pakistan. Pakistan is still a military threat, although the quantum of that threat has reduced considerably. Pakistan has enough internal problems of its own. Pakistan Army's clearly stated aim is to wrest Kashmir from India through proxy war and political diplomatic offensive. Have they given up military means which they tried several times in the past? It appears to us that for the time being, they have not given up military means, but they're not planning to use military means to take Kashmir from India because of their internal problems. And Pakistan is also engaged in containing India in collusion with China to prevent India from emerging as a Southern Asian power. It is my considered view that it is China's grand strategy to confine India to the backwaters of the Indian Ocean as a subaltern state. If we were to pay homage, if we were to take a plate of, in India we call it a thali, what would be an English equivalent? A platter of gold coins every year to Beijing, bow before Xi Jinping or Hu Jintao or Jiang Zemin and say, here, we are your friends, then everything would be all right. But no, India is a regional power in its own right. We don't wish ill for the Chinese. They have influence, they have power, they're an economic superpower. So that's fine, that's okay with us. But we in India aspire to our own place in the sun in Asia. And there, the two grand strategies clash. These are some of the linkages of the Pakistani intelligence organization ISI with Indian insurgent groups inimical to Indian national security. Slow motion implosion, Pakistan. Since there is collusion between the two, China and Pakistan, as Monika pointed out, India must prepare for a two-front war. What sort of military collusion will take place in a two-front war? I can take that on during Q&A if you wish, but it's a very nuanced thing, what China might do if Pakistan fights India and what Pakistan might do if China fights India. There is a saying in the strategic community in New Delhi, China will fight India to the last Pakistani. Chinese presidents have said that the China-Pakistan friendship is higher than the mountains, deeper than the oceans, stronger than steel, and sweeter than honey. I hope they're not heading for diabetes. Pakistan's nuclear doctrine. It is well known, so I shall not spend time on this. First strike doctrine, they would like to convince us that they have a low nuclear threshold and they believe in graduated response. The red lines have been laid down by Khalid Ahmed Kidwai: space, military, economic, and political threshold. Very clearly laid down. But when it comes to space, it's a matter of interpretation, it's a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of analysis. How much would they tolerate in the Lahore sector? How much would they tolerate in the semi-desert area of Fort Abbas? How much would they tolerate in the desert sector further south, Rahimiyar Khan and Hyderabad in Sindh, and so on? So the depth that they might be willing to accommodate, that is an offensive by the Indian Army, would vary from area to area. Recent developments, again mostly covered by Monika: full spectrum deterrence. Full spectrum deterrence. This term is new, Zach, in nuclear theology, if I might use that word.
Which?
Coined by Pakistan, full spectrum deterrence.
I wouldn't say it's new.
Okay. They are also seeking to acquire a triad but their triad, at least for the time being, would be based on, the naval leg of the triad would be based on surface-to-surface missiles and not submarine-to-surface missiles, SLBMs. Safety and security issues create a lot of tension and worry in Southern Asia. Pakistan's nuclear weapons falling into jihadi hands. We can talk about it during Q&A. Pakistan held an exercise called Azm-e-Nau over a period of a couple of years, and some of the major lessons are shown on the slide. Their aim is to checkmate India's cold start doctrine, as it is colloquially known, or proactive offensive operations doctrine, as a former army chief said it was named, by using tactical nuclear weapons. Quick mobilization, a joint response to Indian offensive operations. They are raising about 4 new brigade groups to stop Indian integrated battle groups from ingressing too deep into Pakistan during a conventional conflict. Core reserves are still available. If this effort to stop the offensive fails, then TNWs will be employed on Pakistani territory. They seek to convince India that they have a low nuclear threshold. That's brilliant. Deterrence is a mind game. You must sow the seed of doubt in the adversary's mind. So they're doing a good job. But are we deterred? Let me go on to, lastly, what form limited war might take in Southern Asia. Monika pointed out very well that we have shown immense strategic restraint. I don't want to go too deep into history, but there is a low-intensity, limited conflict being fought on the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir since 1947-48. 60-odd years. In 1965, Pakistani raiders, led by regular army officers, infiltrated in large groups, 200 to 300 each, 10 to 12 groups, Operation Gibraltar. They were stopped. By the Indian Army? No, by the people of Kashmir, who rounded them up and handed them over. Of course, at a couple of places, they ran into army patrols. Then there was the war, of course, in 65. Pakistan supported the Khalistani movement in Indian Punjab in the 1980s. Most of us have forgotten about it. There's been a proxy war on in Jammu and Kashmir since 1989-90, 2.5 decades. We fought a conflict in Kargil in Jammu and Kashmir in 1999. This is by and large well known. When again regular Pakistani army units had intruded across the line of control into areas that were not held by the Indian Army on the assumption that they are too remote, there can be no fighting there. There was no fighting there in the previous wars, so there is no need to waste troops to hold them. But they were thrown out. Attack on Indian Parliament, December 2001. The entire army was mobilized, Operation Parakram. I was commanding a brigade on the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. India did nothing. My brigade did a lot because in Jammu and Kashmir on the line of control, it was a near war situation. What did we do? We can talk about it. Then attack on army family quarters at Kaluchak in Jammu in May 2002. The army was fully ready, deployed for war, but we did nothing. It detracted from the quality of our deterrence. We presented the full Monty for 10 full months, but did nothing. Mumbai terror strikes, November 2008. Again, we did nothing. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and the Congress party lost their prime ministership and rule over the country. Despite grave provocation, we have shown strategic restraint. Would Israel have done this? Has Russia done this in Ukraine? I could give you umpteen examples. You might like to ask me why in Q&A. But like Monika said, the last straw were the Mumbai terror strikes. This is not likely to hold again. if there is another major terror strike in India with state sponsorship, with evidence of state sponsorship. India will not act lightly, but India will act if there is evidence of state sponsorship. What might happen? A major terrorist strike leading to large-scale civilian casualties with sufficient evidence of state sponsorship will lead to military retaliation. What form will that retaliation take? In my view, the aim will be to inflict punishment on the Pakistan Army and the ISI and the limbs of the ISI, the Jamaat-ul-Dawa, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Hizbul Mujahideen. Inflict punishment on these people with a view to raising the cost of waging the proxy war. It's a limited aim. It's a calibrated aim. It's not designed to finish Pakistan as a state. That's not in our interest in any case. What form will this retaliation take? Air and ground-based firepower, strikes likely limited to the LOC. Possible use of special forces and border action teams, but no major ground offensive. When I say major, I mean brigade level. Operations as per planned contingencies. These have been planned, rehearsed, ready for execution. Carefully designed to prevent escalation. Very, very carefully calibrated. But I must end with the last bullet by saying that every military venture is fraught with risk. Danger of escalation will always be there, cannot be ruled out. The army doctrine says that the army would deal a sledgehammer blow to the enemy. Follow a proactive strategy. But to go back to one of my earlier slides, Pakistan seeks to convince India that it has a low nuclear threshold. So there is a dilemma. Pakistan believes that tactical nuclear weapons or battlefield nuclear weapons will halt an Indian army offensive. It's a low-cost, high-payoff option from the Pakistani perspective. They also believe that no Indian Prime Minister will approve massive retaliation for the use of TNWs against Indian forces on Pakistani soil. They have in mind Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. But today we have, if I might use the term, a right-wing government which will be more proactive. So this may not hold true, even if it was to hold true in Manmohan Singh's prime ministership. But Pakistan cannot answer the question, what if? What will India do if there is grave provocation and Pakistan uses tactical nuclear warheads on Indian forces on Pakistani soil? They cannot answer the question, what if? What if India resorts to massive retaliation in keeping with its own doctrine, stated doctrine? As I said a short while earlier, deterrence is ultimately a mind game. So it's the two signaling to each other as to what is likely to deter and what will they do. Let's take a very brief look at the impact that TNWs might have on an Indian army offensive, since Pakistanis are so fond of telling us that we'll stop your offensive with TNWs. Let's assume a combat command advancing 2 combat groups up in desert terrain. The total frontage will be approximately 20 to 25 kilometers. A combat command is an armored brigade, really, with some mechanized elements built into it. If they were to use one 10 KT TNW, 10 KT, that's a lot. We are talking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If they were to use a 10 KT TNW, low air burst on one combat group, which is 8 to 10 kilometers frontage, the AFVs with NBC protection, both sides have armored fighting vehicles with NBC protection, there would be 20 to 25 personnel killed, 8 to 10 AFVs would be destroyed. That combat group operations will come to a halt for the time being temporarily. But the reserve combat group can resume operations in 6 to 8 hours, or the reserve combat command can do that. So what has been achieved? You have crossed the nuclear threshold, You have killed 25 people, you have destroyed 10 tanks, but operations go on. So what are the options that India has for its proactive offensive operations doctrine or so-called cold start? Option 1 is deep strikes. Deep strikes are on the table. Nobody is ruling them out. We have 3 strike corps. If 2 were to be launched deep into Pakistan and 1 held as a countervailing reserve, they would achieve tactical level gains in 24 to 48 hours and strategic level gains in 72 to 96 hours. Unstoppable juggernaut. That's what I like to tell my Pakistani friends. We are coming and you cannot stop us. But that's our signaling to our Pakistani friends. But these strike corps are fairly well organized and equipped. Both in India and Pakistan, people feel that political leaders not schooled in nuclear deterrence may not approve this option of deep strikes. There is merit in this argument. It's on the table, I said, as far as the armed forces are concerned, but there is merit in this argument. Therefore, the cold start doctrine took birth. And what is the cold start doctrine? Large number of division-sized thrusts, we call them IBGs, integrated battle groups, launching shallow penetration offensive operations along a wide front with a view to causing simultaneous destruction of Pakistan's war-waging potential. So you have 2 thresholds likely being crossed, the space threshold and the military threshold. IBGs. Please don't go by the number of arrows. There could be more or less. It's purely a schematic. Purely a schematic. Division-sized pencil thrusts. Maybe my arrows show a little bit of depth, which is not the planning, I think. A number of integrated battle groups to achieve shallow penetration and capture a wide swathe of territory as a bargaining counter. Develop and employ firepower asymmetries to destroy Pakistan's war-waging potential. Massive firepower asymmetries. We are buying a lot of stuff from the United States, including 155-meter artillery, M777 guns. Finally, there is a dispute over Jammu and Kashmir, and a proxy war is on. Till these are resolved, the probability of conventional conflict cannot be ruled out. Both of us have said that we have exercised immense strategic restraint. That is something that the international community recognizes and appreciates. But we have to look for a way to fight a conventional war, a limited conventional war under the nuclear threshold, under the nuclear shadow, under the nuclear umbrella. Fight and win a limited conventional war. Any nation would do that. All of you sitting here would agree with that approach. We cannot be handicapped or hamstrung by Pakistan's nuclear deterrence or signaling. The cold start doctrine gives India the option to launch offensive operations in the plains with minimum risk of nuclear escalation. The risk is there, but it is low. Like I said, every military venture is fraught with risk. That cannot be avoided. However, the doctrine needs fine-tuning in order to mature. There has been one major achievement already, and that is that we have sowed the seed of doubt in the adversary's mind. That's a huge achievement without a shot being fired. A Pakistani general told us at a track 2 in Dubai, I think Zach was there, Naeem Lodi. He became Pakistan's defense secretary a couple of months later and then got sacked a couple of months later. He said, "Gentlemen, we have found the answer to your cold start doctrine. Now don't go and change your doctrine." We spent the rest of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, telling General Naim Lodi, you're making a mistake. Tactical nuclear weapons are no answer. You're making a mistake. Whether the Pakistanis understand that, we don't know. But their signaling continues that they will use tactical nuclear weapons against India on Pakistani soil to stop an Indian offensive. Is that logically justifiable? We must ask the Pakistanis. If India actually retaliates massively as per our stated doctrine, we will take punishment. There is no doubt about it. Many Pakistani missiles armed with nuclear warheads will be left. Some of them will be fired on India. We will take punishment, bitter punishment, best avoided. But Pakistan will be finished as a nuclear state, as a nation state. I think they know it. They don't admit it, but they cannot be foolish. They probably know it. Let me end by saying that Monika and I have jointly authored a book, an edited volume on Pakistan's tactical nuclear weapons. We gave Zach a copy. If possible, do leaf through it. Thank you very much. We'll take all your questions.